Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Pete Mundo.
Hello, 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 hello. Hello, welcome out to Olathe. What an absolutely outstanding event we have set for you this afternoon. By the way, pretty smart of these folks. They wouldn't interrupt with a Chiefs game, right? They're better than that. They know better than that. So before we start here, let's all please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance if we could. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. So, we've got a packed house this afternoon. Cannot wait to have Senator Roger Marshall up here, hear from Attorney General Derek Schmidt as well. Hopefully our next governor here in Kansas. And last, but certainly not least, America's governor, the governor of Florida, Ron DeSantis. Who, I don't know how early some of you got in line. Did you see there were some protesters here on the on the corner of Ridgeview? Did you see that? Well, I couldn't help but think maybe somebody here would have a plane they could fly on the Martha's Vineyard. They might fit in pretty well up there, huh? I do want to briefly mention, I know we're about 2 minutes into our conversation and our event, but Charlie Kirk was scheduled to be here tonight. They put it on me to tell you that his plane got delayed, so he's not here, so you're stuck with me. That's how this all went down. So Charlie sends his best, of course, to all of us here in Kansas, and he wishes he could be here. Unfortunately, he can't. You know, I think about what's at stake for us that are going to be voting here in Kansas in just a few weeks in this governor's race, and I think that there's no better model. I called him America's governor, but I firmly believe that nobody, and I mean not a single governor in this country over the last 2.5 years, has done a better job than Ron DeSantis. Can we all agree on that? I think of everything from COVID policy, keeping our kids in school. We see that learning loss. The stark comparison between our current governor, who wanted to keep the kids out of school into the fall of 2020, and the State Board of Ed said, it's not happening, you can't do it. Can we not forget that I know your current governor, it's weird, she wants you to have short-term memory loss. She wants you to forget 2 years ago, but remember Sam Brown back. It's kind of weird, because how... We're supposed to remember 10 years ago, but not remember 2 years ago. I don't know how that works, but that's really the strategy for the re-election there. And I think about what Governor DeSantis has done, all the success that that state has had, along with, in my lifetime, one of the most savvy political moves that we've seen over the last week. Have you, the meltdown, the liberal meltdown over the last couple of days. I mean, you can't beat it. You've got these people on Martha's Vineyard deporting them off the island, but if you're down in McAllen, Texas, they're like, what are you doing sending them back? I mean, it was political brilliance. I cannot wait to hear from the governor of Florida just days after, obviously, what has been the story in this country. It was just fantastic, and I know that we are all hopeful that Derek Schmidt, he has a playbook. I think every Republican governor has a playbook for how to run their state. And all you have to do is look to the Sunshine State and look to Florida. So it's going to be an absolutely fantastic afternoon. I appreciate you all being here. I appreciate Turning Point putting this on, having me out to open this event today. And if you are not listening, we will be on the air. I'll be on the air tomorrow morning, 6 to 10 a.m. on KCMO Talk Radio. That's 710 a.m., 103.7 FM. Or if you're not in the area, you can pull us up on your KCMO Talk Radio app. So thank you all for coming out. Thank you all for being here. Looking forward to a great day and outstanding events. And now we're going to welcome on and say hello to John Whitmer, KNSS Radio in Wichita, does Sunday nights there. John is going to lead us in our prayer this afternoon. Thank you all. Talk to you in the morning.
Thank you, brother. Good morning. How is everybody this morning? Shall we pray? Almighty God, we thank you for the endowed right to publicly assemble and to address our government. We thank you for bringing each of these patriots here to pack this gathering. Your word says we are to give honor to whom honor is due, and so we gather today to honor Governor Ron DeSantis for his trustworthy leadership of the Sunshine State. Please bless the words of Governor DeSantis as he shares them with us today. We thank you as well for raising up Attorney General Derek Schmidt to serve as our next governor of Kansas. Please give Derek the words to encourage this gathering and empower the next generation of Kansas leaders. Bless each of the candidates present here today with the inspiration, fortitude, and the good resources to prevail for good. Restore our government of the people, by the people, and for the people. And we pray these things in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen. Please, sit down, please. As Pete mentioned, my name is John Whitmer. I also have a conservative talk radio show on KNSS in Wichita. For those of you who, speaking of which, how many folks came up from Wichita? I saw some folks, I recognized some folks from Dodge City. So we've had a great crowd from all across the state. Give yourselves a round of applause. It's a huge crowd. We're so glad to have you here today, and it is such a great way to spend a Sunday supporting liberty and supporting those who champion the cause of liberty. And the one thing in the brief few minutes that I have to share with you, I wanted to encourage you to unite. Some of the primaries were contentious. We've had contentious primaries in the past. It's time to put that behind us. We have some pretenders in a few races. We have to put them behind us. We have to unite. For those of you who don't know my background, I served in the legislature. I now have the privilege of working in radio, but I know some of the people who are running for office right now who pretend to be conservative and who pretend to point names and throw rocks, but I know Laura Kelly, and if we give her 4 more years, it will be a disaster. We cannot afford 4 more years of Laura Kelly. If you think Laura Kelly was liberal before, I guarantee you her next 4 years will be worse. If you think her pro-abortion agenda was bad previously, the next 4 years will be disastrous. If you didn't want Medicaid expansion before, you will have it in the next 4 years. If you thought taxes were bad before, you will have it in the next 4 years. If you thought she spent too much of our money before, I guarantee you she will spend more of our money in the next 4 years. And we can't afford to be complacent. I know we want a red wave, and I know we're likely to get a red wave, but it's not a big wave. And we cannot afford to be complacent and hope and pray and trust. We need to get active. We need to write checks. And we need to get behind our nominee for governor. Derek Schmidt is one hell of a guy, excuse my French. He's trustworthy, he's competent, he's noble, he's filled with character, and he is a man of integrity, and we have to unite behind him. And I extol you to do that today. Another person who fits all of those criteria, who I think has represented us so well, and I am so proud to call him my senator, to call him a friend, and to say he is a man of character and integrity, is our Senator, Dr. Roger Marshall.
Thank you for coming out tonight. What a great crowd. Thank you so much. This is what inspires me every day to get up and keep fighting. Well, John, thank you for the kind introduction. Thank you that what you do for us, giving conservatives like myself a voice on radio, and Pete Mundo before John was up here. Thank you for that opportunity as well. When I first heard about this event, they told me it's going to be on a Sunday. And I said, are you out of your mind? We're going to do an event in Kansas City on a Sunday. But the brilliant people that they are, they chose it when the Chiefs win on a Thursday night. And who would have ever guessed Kansas Jayhawks would be 3-0? Wow, that's great. Yeah, we got some waves out there, some wheat waves. There we go. And then my Wildcats took it on the chin yesterday. But we'll be back. I was visiting with Governor DeSantis back earlier just a second ago. He's actually here. Sometimes I've been to these and wondered, is the guest going to show up? And he's here. And I asked him how I could get a ticket to drive one of those buses from the border to the Delaware Beach. I think that's where they need to go, is the Delaware Beach. I don't have to tell anybody in this room that Joe Biden's policies have been making lives harder for Kansans. And lockdown Laura Kelly hasn't said no to a single one. While Ron DeSantis was the first governor to tell the Biden administration they could stick these mandates in their ears, lockdown Laura Kelly was the first one to embrace them. She was the first governor to lock your kids out of school, and you know what? She's proud of it. She's proud she locked your kids out of school. She's proud of our mental health crisis we have going on that was created by those lockdowns. She's proud of our higher suicide rate. She's proud of our poor academic scores that our students have. She's proud of robbing our children out of a year of education they'll never get back. But that wasn't enough. After she locked our children out of school and she locked us out of our jobs, then she tried locking parents out of school when she vetoed the parental rights bill right here in Kansas. That's right. Lockdown Laura. And in fact, get this, she vetoed 20 tax cuts. 20, which makes inflation worse, including vetoing twice a grocery sales tax cut. She vetoed that twice. But speaking of vetoes, does anyone in this room think that biological boys should compete against girls in sport or women's sports? Well, guess what? Lockdown Laura vetoed that not once, but twice as well. Lockdown Laura does not represent Kansas values. Lockdown Laura took Joe Biden and Washington's money that paid people more to stay at home rather than to go back to work. And folks still won't come back to work. Look, Kansas' number one long-term economic challenge is a lack of people for the jobs that we have. And the Biden-Kelly regime only multiplies that problem. Look, lockdown Laura Kelly's actions, her lack of courage, her fears, her following the woke radical White House socialist agenda left our state with the weakest recovery of all the states, the worst economic recovery in our region. And she, or is she her? Is it them? Is it they? I'm not sure what Laura Kelly prefers. But regardless, lockdown Laura left you and other Kansans with the bill. She's aided and abetted the Biden administration, taking us from the best economy in my professional lifetime to now our worst. That's right, Joe Biden, with Laura Kelly at his side, have declared war on the Kansas farmer and Kansas energy, with aggressive, unfair regulatory practices driving up the cost of your groceries, your gas, and your utilities. While at the same time, they tried to gut the Trump tax cuts and hand our family farms and our family businesses over to the Chinese and foreign investors. Listen, whether you like it or not, we're stuck with Joe Biden for 2 more years. And we cannot have a Kansas governor, reinforcing, doubling down on his radical socialist policies. We cannot give Joe Biden the keys to our kids' future. Laura Kelly will continue to do just that. Kansans need a governor who will stand up to Joe Biden and his terrible policies. Lockdown Laura won't, but Derek Schmidt has, and Derek will. Kansans deserve better than what Lockdown Laura has done to this state. Derek Schmidt will make our lives better for every Kansan. His Kansas roots run deep. He'll fight for Kansas every single day. How do I know this? He's been doing it as your Attorney General. How do I know he'll stand up to Joe Biden? Because he's been doing it every single day Biden has been in office. As I travel the state, folks are far and away mostly concerned about the price of gas, groceries, and housing. They're concerned about the safety and the security of their families. And finally, they want local control of their schools. It's that simple. That's what Kansans are focused on. That's what Kansans care about. And I know, and I believe in all my heart, I give you my word as a marshal. My staff told me you wouldn't get that joke. I thought you would. But Derek will fight. He's going to fight for Kansas families, for Kansas business, for Kansas farmers, for Kansas energy, for lower prices and lower taxes, for getting people back to work, for making our families safer. And he'll fight for our kids' education, demanding more control at the local level. Derek is going to bring a common sense and conservative approach to our values back to the governor's office, so we can make Kansas a great and affordable, better place to live, a better place to raise our family, a better place to work, or a better place to retire. Kansans deserve better than Joe Biden and his accomplice, Lockdown Laura. And Kansans deserve better than passing the buck and our leaderless, rudderless governor hiding at Cedar Crest. It's time to look at tough problems in the eye and fix them, not paper over them. It's time for us all to stand up and fight for our Kansas values, for our children and our grandchildren's future. But we need a leader in Topeka to lead that fight. And that fighter, ladies and gentlemen, that leader is Derek Schmidt. Let's send Lockdown Laura home on November the 8th, and let's introduce the next governor for the great state of Kansas, Derek Schmidt. Give it up, folks.
Thank you. Thank you all very much. Thank you for coming out. Thank you. Thank you all. Thank you. Well, thank you, Kansas. What a great event. Outstanding turnout. Great enthusiasm. Folks fired up and ready to win on November the 8th. I want to thank Turning Point USA and Governor DeSantis' team for putting together this terrific event. Let's give them a round of applause. And also thanks to our U.S. Senator, Dr. Marshall, for his remarks and introduction. You know, maybe most importantly, I want to thank you, Doc, for being a warrior for liberty in Washington, D.C. I will take Doc Marshall over Dr. Fauci every day of the week. Senator Marshall and Republican leaders in Washington have finally convinced Dr. Fauci to retire. And my friends, here in Kansas, we are going to retire Laura Kelly in November. Look, we checked before we scheduled this. There's no Chiefs game this afternoon. Everybody knows that. Got that win out of the way on Thursday. So we figured we needed something fun to do today. You guys having fun? Well, I know I am. Let me tell you, it is an honor of a lifetime to be our Republican Party's nominee for governor of this great state of Kansas. And it will be a greater honor still to fight for you every single day as your governor. You know, growing up in my small hometown of Independence in southeast Kansas, I never thought I'd find myself in this position. I grew up hunting and fishing with my grandpa and having Sunday dinner with the family after church. We hauled little square bales of hay with a homemade hay hook and a pickup truck. I mowed lawns with a buddy of mine for extra money, and we watched Ronald Reagan lead this great country on television. I was raised to stand for the flag and bow in thanksgiving for our blessings, and where I come from, we value faith, we value family, and we value freedom. Thank you for the honor of having served as your Kansas Attorney General these last almost 12 years. In that role, I've stood up for you and your family time and again against illegal big government overreach from Washington, D.C. We sued Barack Obama a lot. And we won. And now we've sued Joe Biden a lot and won. And I gotta apologize to you, I have not sued the president today, but give me a break. It's a Sunday. The courthouse is closed. We'll get back to work next week. Look, I stood up and stopped Biden's threats to throw Kansas workers out of their jobs if they refused his illegal vaccine mandates. We stopped his attempts to implement the Green New Deal by regulation. And my friends right here at home, we stood up and stopped Laura Kelly's threat to punish Kansans for gathering together for religious worship on Easter Sunday. Day in and day out, we have made Kansas safer. I've had the honor of standing 3 times before the Supreme Court of the United States on your behalf, and we won every time. We have put violent criminals behind bars. We've busted big drug companies for peddling addiction for profit by pushing opioids on our friends and neighbors. We have returned more than $1 billion to Kansas consumers and taxpayers. We have stood up time and again for older Kansans, the vulnerable, and others who need our protection. We know how to fight and win, and we are going to win in November. I want to serve as your governor because Kansas can do so much better. I'm running for governor because I want to leave Kansas a better place than I found it for my kids and for yours. So many Kansans I meet every single day are anxious about our future. Our freedoms and our values are under attack. Big government socialism is crowding out the opportunity and self-sufficiency that have motivated and empowered generations that came before. My friends, Joe Biden is the worst president we have had in our lifetimes. He has somehow managed to accomplish the worst possible combination of being radical and incompetent all at the same time. Our president now angrily calls his Republican opponents threats to democracy. That's how he views hundreds of thousands of Kansans. And by the way, did anybody here notice that Governor Kelly didn't say a word about that big speech the president gave the other day in front of that blood-red backdrop, where he stood in front of uniformed Marines and politicized our military, where he angrily pounded on the podium that was adorned with the presidential seal, and where he declared millions of Americans, like people in this room, a threat to our country? We are no threat. We're the patriots who are going to save this country for generations to come. Now, you'd think it'd be pretty easy to denounce or at least criticize the president for that outrageous speech. I did it. But much like anything regarding Joe Biden, Laura Kelly stood silent and just let him get away with it. Kansans deserve a better governor who will not stand silent while Biden and those he enables remake America with a radical agenda. Laura Kelly won't stand up to Joe Biden, but I will. Thank you. Just take, for example, the mess at our southern border. Republican governors have been pleading for help with the Biden border crisis for more than a year, and Laura Kelly has mocked those requests, calling them political games. Imagine thinking that the security situation at our southern border and preventing drug cartels and deadly fentanyl from pouring into our communities is a political game. Laura Kelly won't stand up to Biden's terrible immigration policies that are allowing drugs to flood across our border and kill our kids. But I have, and I will. You know, I noticed that some people are mad about Governor DeSantis rerouting 50 or so migrants to Martha's Vineyard, which is a sanctuary city that's filled with some of our nation's richest and most powerful elites. Well, if that's what it's going to take for Democrats like Joe Biden and Laura Kelly to finally take this issue seriously, then I'm all for it. I said that same thing to our friends in the media the other day, and let me just share, Kansas Democrats weren't happy with me. You know, they don't seem to care when Texas cities are flooded with 200,000 migrants every month. They don't seem to care that the Biden administration has been chartering migrant flights to Florida and other states across the country as this crisis has intensified. They don't seem to care about the migrants themselves who have died because of the humanitarian disaster at the border caused by Joe Biden's reckless policies. But they say, how dare Ron DeSantis send migrants to Martha's Vineyard? Let me tell you something. I am proud to have Governor Ron DeSantis here today. I want a future for our great state of Kansas that looks a whole lot more like Ron DeSantis has in Florida than like where Joe Biden and Laura Kelly want to take this country. I'm honored to have Governor DeSantis' endorsement and support in this race and the endorsement of so many other respected patriots, including Kansas' own, the late Senator Bob Dole, and former Secretary of State Mike Pompeo. So thank you, Governor DeSantis, for coming. I greatly appreciate your support. I also have an invitation to extend today to President Biden. Mr. President, I'd like to invite you to come to Kansas and campaign for your loyal supporter, Laura Kelly. Side by side. I will stand side by side with Ron DeSantis if Laura will stand side by side with Joe Biden. And to all of our friends in the media, you might want to ask the governor if she'll accept that invitation. After all, the two of them do agree about pretty much everything, and she's been riding shotgun on some of Biden's worst policies. So let's talk about Governor Kelly. Governor Kelly is happy about her record these past 4 years because she's only focused on Kansas government. I'm critical about her past 4 years because I'm focused on you and your family and your children. I have traveled this state. I've talked to and listened to Kansans in just about every community, in every county, in every corner of this state, and I've heard you loud and clear. I know Kansans are struggling. Big government inflation is making daily life unaffordable for so many of our friends and neighbors, and I strongly suspect for so many people in this room. Governor Kelly is just wrong to believe that the solution to this and every other problem is to spend more of your money to buy you a bigger government. Over the past 4 years, Kansas spending is up a staggering $6 billion. That's 35%. That's an increase of more than $2,000 per year that every single man, woman, and child in Kansas is shouldering to pay for new government spending. When the time comes that Kansas is no longer awash in money from Washington and Biden's record-setting inflation is no longer driving up state revenues month after month after month, those big spending promises will appear just like a shipwreck is revealed when floodwaters recede. Those bills will come due, and you and I will pay them long after Laura Kelly is gone from public office. My friends, that is $8,000 per year for a family of 4. The increased cost of state government in just one term of this governor, that is all on you. In one term as governor, Laura Kelly has grown state spending as much as her 4 predecessors combined, and it took them 14 years. And what do Kansas families have to show for it? More than 21,000 fewer Kansans are working in our state today than 4 years ago. Daily life is less affordable. So many families are falling further behind every month as Joe Biden and Laura Kelly's big government inflation takes more and more of your wages. The broken foster care system is still not fixed. Neither is the broken unemployment benefits system. Despite all-time record spending in our public schools, our kids' academic achievement has declined because spending more doesn't help when you lock the kids out of the classroom. And that's what Governor Kelly did. And she is proud of it. Governors like Ron DeSantis showed it was possible to keep our kids safe and keep them in school and growing and learning. But my opponent has now said multiple times that she makes no apologies for locking your kids out of their schools. After others had learned better, Laura Kelly even tried to keep kids locked out of school into a second year, into the fall of 2020. And even after that, she wouldn't stand up to fight to get them back in. She didn't learn or adapt. She didn't listen. She just followed the orders of Biden's bureaucrats who said, let's lock them down. My friends, that to me is unforgivable. And our kids are still paying a very high price. It was wrong at the time, and we knew it, and we told her so, and she continues to make no apologies. So what are the results? Public school enrollment is down, parents are frustrated, good teachers are fleeing the profession. Governor Kelly has been telling Kansans she is the education governor. With all due respect, I think America's education governor currently resides in Tallahassee, not in Topeka. The truth is, Laura Kelly has done more damage to more of our children than any other governor in the history of this state. More of our kids have been considering suicide or self-harm. Mental health interventions are up. Student performance is down. I talked with a parent recently whose third grade, is just now walking into her first normal year of school. In class, in person, no mask. 3rd grade for the first time. That's why Kansas parents are angry about the harm Laura Kelly's policies have done to our kids. The choice to lock our kids out of school is the greatest public policy blunder of this generation. She failed our children. But if there's a silver lining, it's this. Her lockdowns also woke up parents, didn't they? Parents all across our state watched over their children's shoulders while they sat on a sofa and tried to have school on a laptop, and they shook their heads and they said, "We can do better than this." My friends, parents must be heard. They must know that our leaders will listen to them. My opponent and those who bankroll her campaigns believe they are in charge of our schools and our kids, but they're not. Parents are. Parents are. Our public schools function at the highest level when engaged parents are deeply involved in their children's education, when they work in tandem with a good classroom teacher. Many of our Kansas schools do function this way, but some do not. And parents and students in Kansas should not have to settle. That's why I will sign into law a Parents' Bill of Rights as soon as I become governor. Our children deserve that. You know, Laura Kelly vetoed the Parents' Bill of Rights. After she locked our children out of school, she tried to lock the parents out behind them. I'm going to sign it, and I've asked the legislature to send it to me in the first session. Since when is it controversial that parents are the ones who have the right to direct the education, the upbringing, the care, and the mental health of their child? And that's what this bill does. Supporting parental rights strengthens the bond between parents and teachers, and our kids will benefit from that. Nothing is more important than our kids. We must put kids and parents first. Of course, we must and will constitutionally fund our schools. But let me tell you this, fully funding schools only works if you don't then lock the children out of them. And guess what? It doesn't work to lock the parents out of them either. Parents matter. That is just Kansas common sense. Parents across Kansas know that we can do better. Students in Kansas deserve better. And by the way, our Kansas girls and young women deserve better. They deserve Thank you. Thank you very much. They deserve fairness in women's sports. Our governor keeps telling us that she's in the middle of the road. But, yeah, you can laugh at that one, that's right. But she has twice vetoed the Fairness in Women's Sports Act. The truth is, on this issue and on so many others, she is far from the middle. She is somewhere way off in left field. Kansas is not California, and it is not New York, and we don't want to be. It is decidedly not middle of the road to say that young girls should be forced to compete against and share a locker room with their biologically male counterparts. 2 times she's been given the opportunity to display some common sense and sign this bill into law, and both times she vetoed it. As the father of 2 daughters, as a Kansan with some common sense, and as a candidate for governor who actually listens to people in this state, I can tell you this with absolute clarity: biological males should not be competing in girls' sports. And unlike our current governor, I will enthusiastically sign that bill the moment it hits my desk. Now that is Kansas common sense. In fact, here's some more common sense. Men shouldn't compete in women's sports. Teachers should not be talking about gender identity or any other human sexuality issue with kindergartners. And parents should have first say in their children's upbringing and education. My opponent is wrong on all of that. I've said it before and I will say it again. Kansas can do better. We need a governor who didn't hurt our kids by rushing to lock them out of school, who won't trail far behind the nation in recovering jobs that her lockdowns destroyed, who never again will lose hundreds of millions of taxpayer dollars to unemployment fraud, while at the same time leaving thousands of out-of-work Kansans out in the cold at their time of greatest need. We need a Republican governor who will grow our communities, not our government, who will champion religious liberty, who will defend our freedoms, who will keep us safe from crime and deadly drugs, who will put students and parents first in education, who will continuously improve our elections, who will encourage work over welfare. We need a governor who will fight to make life more affordable. My friends, on our watch, we will fight for a state where working families can get ahead, where retirees choose to stay and live tax-free, with all respect to Governor DeSantis, where opportunity abounds, and where family budgets finally grow faster than the state budget. We will fight to preserve the freedoms and liberties of the people and our way of life. Bob Dole used to tell me, listen to Kansans. They'll show you the way. Well, the truth is, Kansans tell me they worry that the big government socialism of Joe Biden and the radicals he has empowered puts our very way of life at risk. And my friends, Laura Kelly stands with them. The progressive elites in charge of our country are the same people who once mocked us in Middle America as bitterly clinging to guns and religion, who called hardworking Americans deplorable, who now say that hundreds of thousands of Kansans are a threat to our country, and when their big government socialism invited a recession that puts your paycheck and livelihood at risk, our governor, Laura Kelly, joined their chorus and declared, "Bring it on." Well, my friends, it is time to stand up for Kansas. I will. Laura Kelly won't do it. This vote is about our future. We're going forward. She is stuck in the past. So together, you and I can stand up every day to fight for the hardworking people of this state, and we will leave Kansas better than we found it. That is our mission, because you deserve better. Your family deserves better. I ask you to join our campaign and our cause, and I ask for your support and your vote for governor, because Kansas can and must do better. On my watch, we will together. God bless you all. Thank you. God bless you all. God bless our great state of Kansas, and God continue to bless this tremendous country, the United States of America. And my friends, now what you've been waiting for. It is now my honor to bring out our next speaker, a leader who knows a thing or two about doing better. He is the 46th governor of the state of Florida and a true leader for America. Please give a huge Kansas welcome to Governor Ron DeSantis.
Chapter of this crisis. It has terrified the left. All the bills were signed by Florida Governor Ron DeSantis in just a month's time. DeSantis has done a fantastic job, and the liberals and the leftist media are now going to start attacking him like crazy. The whole nation.
I know corporate media thinks that they can just run over people. You ain't running over this governor. I'm punching back. But let me tell you this. If you're trying to restrict people, impose mandates, if you're trying to ruin their jobs and their livelihoods and their small business, if you are trying to lock people down, I am standing in your way. I'm standing for the people of Florida.
Electing Derek Schmidt to be your next governor. And I'm pleased to be here, and I was excited to be able to help your Attorney General become your next governor. They said they wanted to do it on a Sunday afternoon, and I said, the Kansas City Chiefs better not be playing on that day if you want me there. And sure enough, you had a Thursday night game. And honestly, somebody coming from the state of Florida, where we're known for our college football, we're actually coming to Kansas, and you have an undefeated football team. They say you're only good at basketball, but maybe that's changing as well. So we are excited to be here. And part of the reason I'm here is because if you look over the last few years, governors have been more important to people's freedoms than ever before in the history of our country. And we saw this, and you saw this here in Kansas, and they saw it in California and New York and Illinois and all these states where you had leftist governors locking people down. And in Florida, we lifted people up. We protected people's rights. We protected their right to earn a living. We protected the right of businesses to operate and saved thousands and thousands of small businesses in the process. And we protected the right of parents to send their kids to school in person 5 days a week when many other states were not doing that. And if you think about how, I know this state, you've had a lockdown governor trying to shut the schoolhouse door on students to be able to access good education even at all. And isn't it funny how if you look around across the country, a lot of the people that were locking kids out of school, these would be elites that would put their own kids in in-person education. Maybe they'd hire a private tutor. Maybe they would do private school. And so this is an instance where the elites in our country were really trying to marginalize people less fortunate. And if you look at the learning loss that's happened across the United States in those states that lock the kids under school, we have wiped away a generation of learning gains because of those destructive policies. And I'm just happy to say in Florida, you go back over 2 years ago, I was the first governor of any major state to say, kids need to be in school in person 5 days a week. We know the data is clear on this. We cannot govern based on fear. We have to govern based on facts. And we would go through stuff when you're talking about things that happen with Florida in particular. Anytime we would do stuff,
have the businesses, the beaches, the kids in school. Corporate press would have a conniption. They would start to say everything, and they would all be these parade of horribles. And then 6 months to a year later, every other state would be doing what Florida was doing all along. But I'll tell you, back in those days, in the early days, when we were taking a stand for people's rights and kids' education, we faced a torrent of criticism. I was getting hammered from the left. I was getting hammered from bureaucrats. I was getting hammered from corporate media. But at the end of the day, what a leader does is the leader puts the interest of the people he represents over his own interest. And I didn't know. I didn't know in those days what the political cost would be, but quite frankly, when you're a leader, you have to do what's right, regardless of how all that shakes out. And if I'm saving the jobs of the people I represent, even if that were to cost me an election, that is a choice that a leader must take every day of the week and twice on Sunday. And I'm proud to say that particularly when President Biden took office, Florida really stood as the backstop for freedom. We prevented a lot of onerous policies from getting traction at all. For example, we were the first state, or one of the first states, to ban vaccine passports in our state. They want you to have to show your proof of mRNA vax to go to a restaurant or to go to a movie theater or a ball game or something like that. And we said no in the state of Florida. That is a private decision for people. We are not going to marginalize anybody based on their choice. And we did it. And of course we said government couldn't do that, but we also said it's not allowed even in private sector because some people would say, well, wait a minute, if a business wants to exclude, why shouldn't they have the freedom to do it? And there's two reasons. One is I cared more about the freedom of the individual to participate in society than I cared about the freedom of a corporation to marginalize people from society. But I also understood that my state is a tourism state. People want to come, they want to be able to visit, particularly during COVID, because you could be able to do that without having restrictions imposed on you. And yes, most businesses wouldn't have done it, but even if some did it, people would have said Florida has passports. And that would have really hurt our overall economy. It would have affected people's jobs. It had a whole host. So as it stood, because we did that, 2021, Florida set a record for domestic tourism. We never had more than we did. And I think this is even more interesting. If you looked at all tourism to the United States of America from the United States from foreign countries in 2021, Florida represented almost 45% of all foreign visitors into the United States. Why is that? Well, do you want to go to California and get hectored about wearing a mask or a vax passport? Of course not. You want to come to Florida and be able to make your own decisions. And so we've been able to not only protect individuals by these actions, we've had our hospitality and leisure industry is doing better than it's ever done before. And that's real money in real people's pockets who have jobs because of our policies. And if the left had had their way, they would have been out of a job and they would have had no opportunity whatsoever. So what we did was lead the way on a lot of these issues. And people have responded. People have voted with their feet. And not just, people have moved and visited and all that. Some of our worst critics, there would be lockdown governors from other states, lockdown mayors. They'd impose mandates on their people. They would criticize Florida for not having that. And then the first chance they got, they'd end up down in my state in Florida vacationing. It's like a cottage industry of people. And so that's when you really know, because the way people behave, people can preen politically, people can do and posture and do all this stuff. but how do they behave, and even our worst critics would behave by beating a path down to the state of Florida. In fact, if you look since COVID, Florida has led the country in net in-migration. We've had more adjusted gross income move into our state than has ever moved into a state under a similar period of time in the history of our country, even adjusted for inflation. And the second closest state to us over this time was Texas, but we had almost 4 times as much adjusted gross income move into Florida as even moved into Texas. Who's losing the money? New York, California, Illinois, New Jersey, you know the drill. And honestly, people focus on those states, but we get people from the Rust Belt, the Midwest, and the Great Plains. We have a lot of great people that come. And so I think for the last however many 2 years, if people really got fed up and frustrated with what was going on with their state or their municipality, Florida was the first place people thought to escape to. We served as a refuge of sanity in a world that had gone mad. And now you see the results. And I think what Derek Schmidt is doing by saying the retirement should be tax-free is very smart. And I think that needs to get done. Look, it probably would marginally impact Florida because if you are not getting taxed, you're more likely to stay. People come to my state. But what I see all the time, we just had the 9/11 remembrance, and we were talking about all the people that went into the building for the FDNY, NYPD, all these people. And a lot of those guys are veterans there, were at the stuff. And you look, these guys will serve, they'll retire in New York City, and then most of them move to Florida. So they get the pension and everything, and they're spending all the money in our state, which is good for us, but you should definitely keep that money here. And so I think it's a really smart idea, and I think you'll be able to keep more folks here as a result of this. But people will ask me, they'll say, Governor, you have all these people coming. They're coming from blue states. What does that mean in terms of the voters? Is it going to change the electorate in the state of Florida? And I was born and raised in Florida, and until COVID, I don't think I ever saw a California license plate in Florida. Now you start seeing them all the time. But some people in Florida, my supporters, they got really spooked by this. They're like, are they going to bring Berkeley to Florida? What's going to happen here? Well, the result has actually been, I think, something that's been historic. When I got elected governor almost 4 years ago, there were almost 300,000 more registered Democrats in the state of Florida than Republicans, and we had never in Florida history had more registered Republicans than Democrats. Well, as I stand here today, not even 4 years later, we have about 276,000 more registered Republicans than Democrats. And so I think the point is people respond to leadership, and leadership really matters. You look at some of the things that you're seeing now with the economy and with Joe Biden's agenda. And your governor is lockstep with Biden on everything he's doing. There's no daylight between them, and it's like having Biden as governor here until you have Derek Schmidt take over. So it's a big problem because we in Florida, on the state level, we've got great budget surplus, all this other stuff. But Biden comes in, and what does he decide to do? He decides to print trillions and trillions of dollars when he was warned by people. Of course, people like me were saying that was a bad idea. He doesn't listen to me, but he does listen presumably to people that work for Barack Obama and Bill Clinton. And these are economists saying, if you do this, you are going to spark a massive wave of inflation. And not only did he do that, he tried to restrict production of key things like energy. Well, you restrict production and you inflate the currency, of course you're going to get inflation. So that has been a devastating tax on the average American because, in Florida, I got people maybe making 10% more than they did the year before. But if their costs have gone up more than that, then you're actually losing ground. And his policies have been intentional. He wants to kneecap American energy production. It's so much harder to be able to do. We were energy independent when he took office. Now we're begging the Saudis to pump more gas. And the thing is you've seen the energy. It's actually been a little, you got a little relief lately. Part of that is because China is still locking people down. They're locking down cities of like 20 million people. So the demand went down. I can tell you the supply issue has not been solved. I think most people that look at this are anticipating this to go up, maybe even dramatically between now and the end of the year. So don't think that he has solved this. There are a lot of things going on that has contributed to a little bit of the easing, but I guarantee you we're all going to be paying more very, very soon. And what do they do to claim that they're going to give people relief from this? They do a bill called the Inflation Reduction Act, which even some of the people in the media have acknowledged it ain't going to reduce inflation, and honestly, it's going to increase inflation. They actually are taxing energy in that bill. They got a gas tax, some other stuff in there, and they're mobilizing 87,000 IRS agents to unleash those on the American people. And I can tell you this, those IRS agents are not going to be deployed against limousine liberals in New York and California. They are going to be deployed against small business people. They're going to be deployed against sole proprietors, a handyman, an Uber driver. They're going to be deployed against people who don't have the wherewithal to defend themselves against a very intrusive audit. I think every member of Congress that voted for that bill should have to face audit every year by the IRS. And I also think I'm sick of people like Nancy Pelosi who have been in Congress for decades continuing to produce garbage legislation. I think Pelosi shows that we need term limits for members of Congress. And if you think about the inflation, one of the things, so the inflation actually went up 0.1% last month, even though energy went down. Why is it going up? Well, because you have things like food that's continuing to skyrocket. You have housing, other things. And your governor had an opportunity to sign this bill to give relief off the grocery tax in 2019. And if she had done that, people in Kansas would have relief now, and I think it would have phased out by the end of the year entirely. And so right when people needed her, she stood on the side of the tax collector rather than the taxpayer. I think you need a governor like Derek Schmidt who's going to put taxpayers first. He's going to give relief. And all you have to do, and Derek understands that, and Florida does this, and other states around the country too. We're not the only ones. You look at these really, really dysfunctional states governed by leftist politicians, and they have uncontrollable amounts of taxing and spending and ridiculous regulations. Well, in Florida, we do it much different than that. We tax very lightly. We have no income tax, and we never will as long as I'm kicking and screaming. We spend very conservatively in the state of Florida, and while we have regulations, those are reasonable regulations, and the regulations are designed because we want people to succeed in business and succeed in life. And if you look at how we govern our fiscal in Florida and compare us to like New York, for example, so we now have 3 million more people in Florida than in New York, and yet our budget is less than half the size of the state of New York's budget. But if you talk to people who move from up there down to Florida, we have better services, we have better infrastructure, and we have higher performing K through 12 schools. In fact, we're now, most recent Education Week rankings for student achievement, K-12 ranked us number 3 in the country, much better than where they are. And we do all of that with, of course, no income tax. But yet, even with that budget, which was $102 billion, New York's was, I think, $225, we generated a $22 billion surplus, the largest in the history of the state of Florida. So when you do good policy, it reinforces itself. You expand the economy, and even with having very low taxes, you end up generating the necessary revenue to meet the needs of the people of your state. And I think that you would see in Florida, the economy, you look, our unemployment rate's 2.7%. The nation as a whole is 3.7%. You look at the labor force is better than the national average in Florida. The growth in the economy, pretty much every metric, we have far surpassed the national average. And the thing is this stuff is really not rocket science. States, we have 50 states. They're laboratories of democracy. Look who's performed well and look who's performed poorly, and follow the states that have performed well. And I know you guys have a legislature here that will produce a lot of good legislation. You just need a governor that will sign the legislation, and you guys can make that happen. I'm glad that you have as your candidate the Attorney General, because now more than ever, we as Republicans need to lead on ensuring law and order in our communities. If you look at what's happened over the last few years, you've seen devastating increases in crime in communities that have basically created those conditions with their really bad policies. We saw the riots that happened 2 summers ago. I can tell you in Florida, when I saw that going on, I called up the National Guard immediately. I had state law enforcement. We're not letting anything burn down in Florida. But they wanted to defund law enforcement. So you saw a lot of these places around the country slashing police budgets, reducing the amount of officers on the street. They claim that if someone's robbing your house, you don't need a police officer, you just have a social worker come up and they'll just resolve everything amicably, right? No, that's not the way it works. And so crime has spiked in those areas that did that. But you also have this relatively new phenomenon of these prosecutors, and many of them get elected with support from people like George Soros, and they run saying, we don't believe in the criminal justice system. We think it needs to be changed. And so they're not legislature. They can't change the law. So instead of doing that and running for legislature, they get elected as a prosecutor and they say, we're going to change the system by enforcing the laws we don't like. So they pick and choose which laws they're going to enforce. And so you see in places like San Francisco, you could steal $999 or less worth of merchandise, and they had a policy that you would not be prosecuted. Well, what happens? All these places get looted. A lot of the stores have to close. And so when you're doing that, when you're not following your oath of office, you're creating the conditions for lawlessness to run rampant. And I think if you look at defund the police, it's been devastating, but I think these prosecutors have had an even worse impact on public safety. And there are people in this country that are dead today because those prosecutors wouldn't hold criminals accountable. I can tell you this, in Florida, when we saw this happening around the country, I worked with my legislature and we enacted legislation that prohibits our local governments from defunding the police. We also enacted legislation to say, I'm looking around the country and seeing like Portland, they will riot every day, it seemed like. The guys will get arrested, they'll take their mugshots, slap them on the wrist, and they throw them right back on the street to do it all over again. And in Florida, we said, no, if you're engaging in rioting, looting, any type of mob violence, you're not getting a slap on the wrist in Florida, you're getting the inside of a jail cell. We're gonna hold you accountable. And here's why it's important, because yes, obviously the victims of crime, these are people, many of these cities, they should not have been victims, that a lot of this was preventable, and our system should be more concerned about the rights of the victims than in coddling criminals. But what happens is when you go down the road of woke criminal justice, it tears at the whole fabric of society. You can't have a strong economy if you don't have public safety. You're not going to have good education if you don't have public safety. So it's really the foundation of a free society that you can go out, pursue your dreams, and exercise your rights in a safe environment. And I know with Derek Schmidt as governor, he is not going to let Kansas go down the road of some of these other states where they're putting the criminals before the law-abiding citizens. Speaking of law and order, the one place in our country where we see virtually no law and order is at the southern border. And this is a crisis. It's now getting a little bit more attention. This is a crisis. It is a crisis. And it's a manufactured crisis because of Biden's failed policies. He came into office and he reversed President Trump's policies at the border. And he didn't do it because his policies would work better. He did it because he didn't like Trump and he had to show his voters that he was going to reverse everything Trump did. So what has happened, as a result of that, we've had the worst run at the border than any time that I can remember in my lifetime. The Mexican drug cartels are having an absolute field day. They're making money hand over fist. They are absolutely killing us at the border. And all of this stuff has been going on since virtually the day Joe Biden took office. And yet, when we had first tens of thousands, then hundreds of thousands, then millions of people crossing that border illegally, did you hear a major spasm by the media of outrage? No, they didn't care about that. When you have migrants that are being basically told that they can come even though it's against the law, and you have deaths in the Rio Grande Valley, you have 53 migrants that died in a trailer in Texas, did you hear howls of outrage from the corporate press or the political left? No, you didn't do that. When you've had criminal aliens cross the southern border and then victimize American citizens, do you hear any outrage about that? I haven't heard any outrage about that. When you've seen fentanyl coming across the border in numbers that are unimaginable, and we now have fentanyl deaths as the leading cause of death for Americans 18 to 45, do you have a cycle of outrage about that? No, I haven't heard that. It is only when 50 illegal aliens show up in a very wealthy enclave that, oh, by the way, had billed itself as a sanctuary city. They claim that nobody is illegal and that everybody is welcome. And yet, when we had 50 illegal aliens show up to Martha's Vineyard, and if you think about it, in spite of what some of these people tell you, Biden had left these people. They were homeless. They were hungry. They were trying to get to places like Florida and others. They were given basically a lottery ticket to get to the wealthiest sanctuary jurisdiction in the country. There's jobs available there. You just look, there's jobs listings there. There's hotels available, Airbnb rentals available. You could actually go. And so they build themselves as this. You're talking about 50 people. Did they get them employed? Did they get them set up? No, they called out the National Guard and they deported those people off the island the very next day. So here's the thing. I think that we should return to the policies that President Trump had, such as the Remain in Mexico policy. And so what's happening at the border? You have 90+% of the people are showing up. They're being told to make an asylum claim. Those asylum claims are not in fact valid. What President Trump said is, okay, you remain in Mexico while that's being adjudicated. Most of them, of course, don't qualify, and so they're not even going to get access to the United States. But what Biden is doing, they make the claim, and they're released and basically allowed to go into the interior of our country. So what I would like is for him to reinstitute that policy, because then we wouldn't have millions of people coming across illegally. But in the absence of that, if you're going to support open borders, then you should have to deal with the consequences of open borders. And I think what we've seen with not just Martha's Vineyard, but New York City, D.C., but certainly in Martha's Vineyard, you have people that are claiming to be a sanctuary jurisdiction, and now we see that's just self-congratulatory virtue signaling. It is hollow. And the reason it's hollow is because you just can't run society without the rule of law. You can't run society without having structure to an immigration process. And it's not just the fact that drugs is a huge problem. Criminal aliens are coming across, but the average person, to just put that many people in American communities is difficult. The wealthiest enclave couldn't even deal with 50. How do you think the border towns feel when they get thousands and thousands of them? But here's what this has shown. What this has shown is that elites in our country want to impose their policy vision on America, including open borders, but also many other, I think, harmful policies. But they do not themselves want to have to face the consequences of those policies. They want all the cost to go on you. They want all the cost to go on people they don't like. And that is not how you do policy, and that is just frankly wrong. So Joe Biden has an opportunity. He's now supposedly caring about the border. He's all upset, when this was going on with Texas and Florida. Okay, well, why don't you step up to the plate, reinstitute Remain in Mexico, secure the border, and finish the border wall? And if you do that, then it's fine. One of the things I'm excited about being here is because I think you guys have a great opportunity to really make some serious strides with respect to education. And I think we've seen, it's always been an important issue for me. I know it's probably been an important issue for all of you, but I think the importance now that not just parents, but communities are placing on this, because I think they understand that if our whole education system continues to go in the direction that it's gone in many places in this country, we're not going to be producing a next generation that's going to be capable of really keeping our free society going and making America better than it has been in the past. So it's a foundational issue, and I'm just happy to say in Florida, we have stood for the principle that the purpose of our school system is to educate our kids, not to indoctrinate our kids. And part of that is that parents have fundamental rights and fundamental roles in the education and upbringing of their kids. They have a right to be involved in what's being taught in school. And sure enough, in Florida, we've signed a Parents' Bill of Rights. If you elect Derek, you guys will get a Parents' Bill of Rights too. We've also signed curriculum transparency. Every parent in Florida has a right to know what is being taught in school, what curriculum is being used, what books are in the library, and I'll tell you, this is very disturbing to see. They will put in a middle school library books that are very graphic, very pornographic, and you got to ask yourself, how is that appropriate to have a 12-year-old being exposed to this type of stuff? And so it's all in Florida, parents are armed with the ability to protest against that and to ensure that things are age appropriate. So I think having curriculum transparency, the only reason people would oppose curriculum transparency is if they're worried that the parents being involved is going to be an impediment to their quest to indoctrinate their ideology. That's the only reason why they're upset about it. Because as a teacher, most teachers They want to have the parents involved because teachers know if the parent's taking an interest in their kid's education, the kid's going to do much better with schoolwork. If the parents are neglectful, it's harder. It all falls on the teacher. So teachers overwhelmingly want parents involved. It's only those folks that are trying to use the school system to impose an agenda. And I'll tell you, you saw it here with your governor basically being controlled by the teachers' unions. Those unions have become very partisan, and they're out to put a political agenda on the schools. In Florida, a majority of our teachers aren't even members of the teachers' union. And the majority aren't members, and what's happened since I've been governor, we've done more increases in teacher compensation than at any time in Florida history. You don't need a union to get that. I want to do it as governor, and we have done it. But I think that opposing the Parents' Bill of Rights, locking kids out of school, that is all because you have this very powerful interest group that I think we've seen since COVID. That interest group has not put the best interests of the students first. They have not put the best interests of the parents first. They have put the best interests of maintaining and expanding their own power first. And that is wrong, and we need a school system that puts the students first and that protects the rights of parents. When I was growing up in Florida and going to school, I just had school. I never felt like I had some ideology trying to be imposed upon me. We learned math, we learned history, we learned all these things. Now, so many people are trying to use the schools to impose things like critical race theory in the K through 12 classroom. And in Florida, we've banned that in our K through 12 schools. We are not going to allow our tax dollars to be used to teach our kids to hate our country or to hate each other. That's not happening on my watch. And it's pernicious because it's dividing people based on their skin color. It's telling, they will actually in some of these lessons tell a 7-year-old who's white, you're an oppressor. If you're African American, you're oppressed. What kind of a message is that sending to these young kids? And so in Florida, we say, no, we're not going to judge you based on the color of your skin. We're going to judge you based on the content of your character, based on your merit and achievement. Everybody can succeed in our state, and we're going to make sure that people have the tools to succeed, but we're not going to let you manipulate our history in order to advance a modern-day ideological agenda. And you've seen this with things like the 1619 Project, which was something that was endorsed by the New York Times, where they said that the American Revolution was fought to defend slavery. And that's just false. That is not true. That is not what Frederick Douglass said about the American Revolution or the Constitution. That's not what Abraham Lincoln said. Literally, that's what nobody has said until we had this very aggressive leftism where they're trying to basically impose an agenda on how kids do history. So we're going to teach accurate history, and in Florida, we've worked very hard on expanding civics education in our schools, because if you think about it, we need to teach kids what it means to be an American, what our Constitution is based off, the Declaration of Independence. You know, our society is based on the idea that our rights come from our God, not from our government. That's not true every place in the world. So we need to teach the kids what the founders established. Teach them how these principles have been very important all throughout history. Yes, at the founding, the Civil War, during World War II, Civil Rights Movement, winning the Cold War. All these things are so important. We also in Florida teach them not only about our country, but also how we're different than others. And so I recently signed legislation establishing November 7th as a day to teach kids about the victims of communist regimes throughout the world. We have probably more people that have escaped communism in Florida than just about any state. Certainly as a percentage, we have a lot. And we need to let kids know that the death toll from Marxism, Leninism was over 100 million people in the last 100 years alone. That's something that a lot of people at these universities may not want to talk about. It's something that others, but it's a fact, and we need to be honest about that. So we're going to do that. And we're also, and some of you may have heard about this particular piece of legislation, we have in Florida the revolutionary idea that parents should be able to send their kids to elementary school without having woke gender ideology injected into the curriculum. It should just be common sense. But it's unfortunately become something that people are honestly trying to do, and you do have it. Don't let anyone tell you don't. There's pockets of this country, that do have it. And these kids need to be learning to read and write and add and subtract. They don't need to have curriculum about sexuality, about transgender, about any of that. It is wrong. It's wrong to tell a student who's 7 years old that, you may have been born a girl, but maybe you're really a boy. That is just totally inappropriate. And so our legislature worked to provide those protections for parents. There was some in the media and on the left that didn't like that very much. And I think what the left understood was, okay, we can't really win elections on this because parents don't want this, and it's not something that would be popular if we ran on it. So what are we going to do? And they thought the way they could stop the legislation was to pressure large corporations like Disney to get involved and come out against the bill. And if you think about it, it does make sense because unfortunately, there have been Republican governors who have caved to corporate pressure. So I think they thought if they got Disney involved, Disney came down against it, then someone like me may, not be willing to kind of withstand that. Well, here I stand. I didn't move. We stood strong, and we did what was right for these students. We did what was right for these parents. And I made clear to everybody in Florida that I'm governing based on the best interests of the people of my state. I will not subcontract out my leadership to a woke corporation. And I think that this is an example of where, and the thing about Disney was like, okay, fine, you virtue signaled, you did it. They actually came and said after the bill was signed that they were going to make it their mission to repeal parents' rights legislation in Florida. And I thought to myself, okay, you're based in California, you work very closely in China, don't say a word about any of that. Middle East, you make money. Okay, so you're coming after our parents and you're coming after this legislation. Well, you may have a right to do that, but you don't have a right to force us to subsidize it. And the fact is, they were getting more subsidies since the 1960s than any company in Florida history. They alone had their own government that they control in Central Florida. They get exemptions from laws that their competitors have to follow, and they've gotten massive tax breaks. And so what we said was, okay, those values of trying to get gender ideology in elementary school, those are not our values in Florida. You have been put on a pedestal by the state for decades. We are not comfortable with that arrangement anymore. And so because we acted, Disney is no longer going to have its own government. They're going to live under the same laws as everybody else, and they are going to pay their fair share of taxes in the state of Florida. We also signed legislation, and this all kind of flows from kind of the same mindset, but we signed legislation in Florida protecting the rights of our girls and women to participate in athletic competitions with fairness and with integrity. You look to see what's going on. You will have somebody in Pennsylvania swim on the men's team for 3 years and then switch to swim on the women's team and, quote, win the national championship. That is wrong. That hurt opportunities for some of these girls who have been working very hard. And it wasn't just the girl who's from Florida who would have won the national championship. It's maybe one that would have qualified for the finals and on down the line. So our view is very simple, that we're going to protect their rights to compete, and we're happy to sign the legislation. People were saying the corporations were going to come after us and all this, and all I said, they said the NCAA wouldn't hold events in Florida if we sign legislation protecting women's sports, and I just said, go ahead, make my day. I'd rather stand up for the girls of my state than cave to your pressure. But this is a huge opportunity for you in Kansas. You have an opportunity to stand up for the girls of the state. I got a 5 and 4 and 2-year-old at home. The 5 and the 2 are young little girls, and they are both very athletic. I don't know what their interests are going to be. I'm not going to force them to do, but they very well may want to participate in athletics, and they're going to have that opportunity, and it's not going to be robbed from them because of some type of ideological issue. You guys have an opportunity to do that in Kansas. All the stuff that has been passed to protect the integrity of the curriculum in schools, to make sure you don't have gender ideology, and to make sure girls can play and participate in sports with integrity, Derek Schmidt will sign all of that, and you guys will have it. So you just got to come out and vote, and you'll get it done. I will just kind of say, if you think about this issue with like women's sports, the gender, some of this stuff, people will come up to me and they'll be like, Governor, what is going on with this stuff? Because honestly, even 5 years ago, we wouldn't have been talking about that. Why is this happening? And I think it all goes back to what I call the woke mind virus. This is something that is ideology. It's infecting a lot of our elite institutions. And you think about how Biden gives that speech where he's yelling in front of the blood red thing, where he's basically attacking the people of this country that disagree with his agenda, which, oh, by the way, is the majority of people. I know it's the majority here in Kansas. It's definitely the majority in Florida that disapprove. And so they're trying to demonize people that disagree with them. Just think about if they would have had 1 or 2 more senators elected in 2020, what was their agenda? They wanted to pack the U.S. Supreme Court. They wanted to abolish the Electoral College. They wanted to make Washington, D.C. a state so they get 2 radical Democrat senators for life. And they wanted to federalize things like ballot harvesting and eliminate voter ID requirements all across the country. Now, think about that agenda. And if you go to any American family in Kansas or Florida or beyond, and you wonder what they're talking about over their kitchen table, they're not saying, oh, I wish we could have more ballot harvesting. No one's saying that, right? That is not an agenda that's speaking to the needs of the average American. That is an agenda that is trying to make the conservative part of the country second-class citizens. And so when Biden is verbalizing what their agenda has always seen, you got to realize the stakes are high. Unfortunately, they're high. You think about things that are going on where they're trying to erase history, taking George Washington's name off school buildings in California, taking down statues of Thomas Jefferson or Teddy Roosevelt or all these great figures throughout our history. Why would they be doing that? They're trying to delegitimize our institutions. They're trying to delegitimize our history, and they want their leftism to be the founding principles of our society. And that would be a disaster if that ever happened. The problem, I think, and why these are challenging times is because that woke mind virus is not just about people getting elected to office. You see it infect corporate America. You see it infect big tech where they're censoring conservative voices. You see it in the bureaucracy, even in the military. As a Navy veteran, and I was so happy to serve, and it was great years, and I love our veterans, and I appreciate active duty, and I love the institution, but you look at some of the military, and they're focusing on a lot of woke stuff. And so this is kind of everywhere, and what that means is these are tough fights. The stakes are very high. We really have the deck stacked against us. I mean, we're the underdog in a lot of this stuff because they have so much institutional power that it makes it much more difficult, obviously with corporate press as their megaphone as well. So here's the good news, though, is that when things really seem to be going crazy in society, when people speak the truth, it resonates because people want to hear the truth. They're sick of being lied to. They want to have leaders that'll stand up there and be honest with them. And I think in Florida, our formula is very simple. We exercise common sense. A lot of the things we've done that gets attention is just common sense. We root everything we do in the time-tested principles that founded this country and that have made this country great. And we have the courage of our convictions. We understand that when you stand up, when you fight against the machine, they are going to come after you. And it's not just me they'll come after. They come after a parent who goes to a school board meeting, who's concerned about curriculum. They will marginalize people off social media if you happen to say the wrong thing. So right now, standing for the truth, it is not cost-free. And it's not cost-free at any level of your participation. But these are fights that we have to have, and these are fights that we have to win. And I think about some of the great people that Kansas has produced. You mentioned, they were mentioning Senator Dole, who was a World War II hero, of course. You had Dwight Eisenhower, who was one of the best in terms of his leadership. And Dwight Eisenhower was somebody that I actually relied on during the high days of COVID because he gave a farewell address, which many people remember for warning about the dangers of the military-industrial complex, and he was very right about that. But he also talked in his farewell address about the fact that the federal government was getting more intermingled with scientific research. And he said, there's a danger that public policy itself could become captive by what he called a scientific technological elite. He was basically talking about Fauci 50, 60 years before. But what he said was that, okay, you have to, as a statesman, you've got to deal with all different perspectives. And so, of course, you deal with a technological or scientific perspective, but they have tunnel vision. They're not capable of seeing everything that's going on in society. It's the job of a statesman to harmonize all the different interests in society. And so I knew with COVID, it wasn't just about one myopic focus on one particular respiratory virus. Because, you look at some of these states, the lockdown states had higher excess mortality than Florida. Part of the reason is they had lockdown deaths. Their policies caused lockdown deaths. So you had to look at how society could function overall health, overall opportunity, overall education, all these different things. And the people that followed Eisenhower did much better than the people that followed Fauci, I can tell you that. But I bring up people like that because, there have been so many people through the years who have fought for us, who have sacrificed for us because they really believe in a free society and the principles that made this country great. I was never reminded of that more, I think, poignantly than I was actually a congressman for 3 terms. I've recovered from that experience, and I'm happy to be out. A lot of my people that I was friends with, then they'll see me, they say, we miss you up there. I say, I do not miss you at all. I would much rather be where I'm at. But you go and you would fly up to D.C. all the time, and there was one route that we would take to Reagan Airport from Florida where you would go right flush parallel to the National Mall. And it goes pretty low, so you look out that left side of the plane, you see the Lincoln Memorial, you see the reflecting pond, Washington Monument, you could see Jefferson, MLK memorials, and then you eventually see a real sweeping, majestic view of the Capitol building up there on the hill. And if you think about all those are symbolic of a country that represents really important principles. And you feel good as an American to see that display and to understand that we have been different than most countries that have come before. But what I understood after I did that so many times was the best monuments that really represented the best of America were actually not out that left side of the plane on the National Mall. Because if you looked out the other side of the plane, you look over the Potomac River, you'd look into Northern Virginia, and the monuments they had there were very small, very nondescript. They were arranged very orderly across various rolling hills in a place called Arlington National Cemetery. And the truth of the matter is that you can have the best Declaration of Independence in the world, you could have the best Constitution in the world, you could have the best ideals that have ever been created, but none of that's going to amount to very much if you don't have people that are willing to stand up, put on a uniform, risk their lives, and indeed give their lives so that others can be free. So when I'm looking at the battles that we have ahead, and I look to opportunities to elect governors like here with Derek Schmidt. We're going to be in Green Bay later today, helping our candidate there. There's a lot that you have to put up with. There's a lot of nonsense that goes around, but the sacrifices we are called upon to make right now to help save our states and our country are a fraction of what those people had to do. So I'm motivated for a better life for us, our kids, our grandkids, but I'm also motivated to do justice to the sacrifices that those who've come before us. We've got 2 more months to make our voices heard here in these elections. I know you guys will come out, and I fully expect that. I think our results will come in soon, so hopefully I'll get good news, and then I look forward to looking at the Kansas results and seeing that you guys will soon have Governor Derek Schmidt. Thank you all. God bless you.